death, and the selfishness of family members. Have you ever experienced a traumatizing death like in your family, and then your family members either turn against you, they act funny, or they're just completely selfish and they don't consider the feelings of others? Tell me. Okay, so an incident has happened. I have a little cousin who's in his early 20s, around 19, 20, and his wife was pregnant. She was to give birth, I think, in another 3 months, but she ended up dropping dead. She was only 18. She ended up dropping dead. And she dropped dead in their home. He's in the military, so they're far away from home. So she didn't really have anyone to help her with that, make sure she go to the doctors, prenatal pills, all that. She didn't have that. And so I don't think she really went to the doctor and got sought out care or whatnot, pre-pregnancy care. So she got sick. They took her to the hospital. The doctors ended up sending her home. I guess he left out the house, figuring she would be fine because the doctors did release her or whatnot. And when he came back home, she was dead. Now, with him, he's only in his early 20s. That's tragic on a young mind, to walk in and your wife is dead. And not only that, she was pregnant with your child. So not only is she dead, but your child is also dead. Okay, so his grandfather, which was also my uncle, because that was my mother's sister husband. This is immediate family. His grandfather, back in 2016, somewhere around 2015, 2016, going into 2016, his grandfather dropped dead in the house right in front of him. But see, at that time, when his grandfather screamed out, my uncle, he screamed out and said, "God, please help me, please help me." He was screaming real loud because he was in pain. So he ended up screaming real loud out to God. This was my uncle, which was his grandfather. He screamed and then he hit the floor. Now, my auntie, which is my cousin's grandmother, told her, she just freaked out, as well as my cousin. And so my cousin, he ended up trying to give my uncle CPR, which I don't know if he really understood or knew how to properly do it, but he tried. He tried giving him CPR. But basically, my uncle was dead right then. And so they called the paramedics, and with them still not knowing that he was dead, the paramedics came and rushed him to the hospital, and of course he was pronounced dead at the hospital. Anyways, but a young mind. Once again, my baby cousin was only 20. His grandfather dropped dead in front of him. He tried to administer CPR. Not only that, my baby cousin has some type of mood issues, like mood disorder. I believe he's bipolar. Something is wrong, and he doesn't really, I could say his mood is more so flat. He doesn't really crack jokes. He doesn't really smile too much. He doesn't do really too much of any of that. He's just always at one mood, basically just level and still with everything. And so it's just so strange because his grandmother, of course, her feelings is hurt because once he came back in town, which is where her family, the one that died, and his family is living at, he didn't take it upon himself to go visit my auntie. And so she's in mourning over there because he didn't come visit. And that's understandable. When I speak on selfishness, I'm not speaking in relation to her because she's still mourning her husband. Okay? So I'm not speaking in relation to her, but I'm speaking in relation to another family member and other family members. They're not taking into account that this young man, only in his early 20s, his wife just died. She dropped. How do you be 18 and you're pregnant with your second child, and you're married here and you drop dead and your husband finds you. He finds you like that. So not only is that one death, that's two. But leading up to this was the death of his grandfather right in front of his face. Do you know and understand? I have not been there, so I can't really say, but I try to put myself in other people's shoes. How would I feel if my grandfather screamed in pain for someone to help me because he knew that something was happening, he was dying? And not only that, as he was screaming, once he hit the floor, you know how you gurgle for your last breath? Your last breath is basically, your breathing is getting to a point where your life is being taken completely away. So you gurgle to try to catch your last breath or whatnot. That's what happened, and that's what my baby cousin saw. He saw all this. He saw all this. And his wife, he walked in with her dead. And so when I rewind back and say family members being selfish, and no, not his grandmother, I understand her case. Other family members, with him, with my uncle dying the way that he did, my little baby cousin didn't even go to the funeral. He didn't attend the funeral. I think it was too much for his mind, and I told everyone this. And yet they didn't really take into consideration, if someone dies in front of you like that, it's more traumatizing to stand over their casket, because remember, your lips was on their lips trying to save them and bring them back to life. So he didn't attend the funeral. And then with him in relation to his wife, he's spending time over there because, yes, she just died. So he's spending family with his in-laws. And our family, they don't understand it. And this one particular family member is very judgmental. And I won't say which one. And no, it's not his grandmother. Once again, it's not my cousin's grandmother. But they're like, what's wrong with him? Why would he, and on my end, I think I'm so understanding. I see what's wrong. I see what's wrong. Someone literally hung up the phone in my face a second ago, which had contributed to this video, me making this video. They hung up in my face and said, you know what, that's why I hate telling you stuff. They told me this. I hate telling you stuff because I told them, you such a negative person. And that's not me speaking bad about this person. But why do we sometimes think so much of ourselves in relation to sometimes people dying that we don't consider other people's feelings? We don't consider other people's feelings. And I had to cry. I had to stop for a second before I made this video, and it put tears in my eyes. Because my cousin being so young to experience death like that. I don't think his mind, especially he has, like I said, a form of bipolar disorder. I think it runs through his father, because everyone is saying he's just like his father. His father is bipolar and schizophrenic. And so to have that mindset is not to process the world in a normal way. It doesn't, to have that disorder, I don't even begin to know how that feels, but I know that their brain is not processing in the normal way. Stop it. No. They're not processing information in a normal way. He and his father having mental illness, they're not processing life. They're not processing life logically. Hold on, I'm sorry. Prince! Stop it. No. I am so sorry. I'm sorry about that. That is so rude. He has his moments. His name is Prince, by the way. Like the singer Prince. But yes, and then there's Violet. So I have Violet and I have Prince. Inspiration comes from the singer Prince, Roger Nelson. No. So I understand where my baby cousin is coming from. I understand all this because I've studied psychology. I studied psychology, various forms of psychology, and not only that, I've studied abnormal human psychology. which is just a branch off of psychology. It's the behaviors which are considered sometimes abnormal here in American society. Some might feel that certain behaviors that don't seem normal, people might label it defiant behavior. So I understand all this. I understand this, period. And even if I didn't study psychology, I think I would still understand this logically. You don't have deaths like this. Remember, this young fragile mind is walking up on these people as they're dead or as they're on their way out, leaving this life. And then to have mental illness on top of it is to not process properly at all. I think he doesn't even know how to feel. I truly believe that. I think he does not even know how to feel. And not only that, usually when deaths like that happen, because he's been working since he was young or whatnot. He served in the military, which that's where he's working now, or whatnot, living near base. Usually you're given 2 or 3 days off to process death after it happens, and then you go back to work. Not only that, he has a young son. His son is 2 years old? His son is 2 years old. So now he has to put into words how mommy has left this world and she's not coming back, and how no one could ever fill that role in that space of motherhood towards that child, which is his child. So now he's going to have to take it upon himself to play both mommy and daddy at 20 years old. None of this makes sense, and yet life will be life. And yet I just feel like for the family, like, I'm selfish. Yes, I am selfish. I can be very, very selfish. And it's so that my selfishness is actually selflessness. I want myself to be so in order that I don't have to depend on others. And that's why I'm selfish. I try to put me first. That way I'm not hanging all on others to have them take care of me and provide for me. So that's why I'm selfish. But in relation to this death, why are we not considering other people's feelings at a young age? Because I think nowadays there's so many more lives being born, which means we're losing so many more people, maybe more so than in the past. I don't know. Who knows? But people are actually living longer because of technology. But it's so sad. You can be so selfish, and it makes me, and I'm gonna have to ask him, how are your emotions in all of this, dealing with the death of your grandfather and now the death of your wife, and now you have to raise your son. Now it's only you and your son, and yet that one selfish family member who likes to judge everything. Okay, so what? They hung up or slammed the phone in my face. I believe they slammed the phone in my face because every time I say something, it's the truth. I'm not saying stuff just to talk. We have to be less selfish in the area of death and dying, and death greeting us in the way that it does and it has. Because people outside of us, they also have feelings. They're not robots. They're not robots. And so they're not going to process things the way that we may want them to. They're not. They process things in the way that they process things, because remember, they're different from us. They're individuals. It's individuality is what it is. So I had to allow that person to be themselves. If I was down in the South where they're located and say he didn't talk to me, I would know right then there was a problem. All this is weighing heavy on his mind, and it's a problem for him, along with the mental illness. He could be trying to find his way through all of this. No one knows. Because if you live with your grandfather your whole life and he raises you as his very own son, because my cousin, Seeming his father was bipolar and schizophrenic. My grandfather, I mean, not my grandfather, my uncle, my mom's sister's husband raised him like he was his father, as well as my mom's sister raised him like she was the mother, because my cousin had them at such a young age. He was a twin. He's a twin. And so my cousin had both of them, the twins, he and his sister, she had them at 14 years old. And so someone else had to step up to the plate and be a mother and a father where she couldn't be completely, because she also had other kids later on, and it was just too much for her to deal with. And so that was basically his father. It was his grandfather, but because he took upon himself to play the role of father to him, the man was his father. So now as we rewind the tape on this issue, the man dropping dead before his very eyes, that took his last breath, that screamed out to God to help him. The man that took his last breath in front of this young man was his father in place of his grandfather. And no one speaks on that. See, I think in the black community we have issues. And I think that, I know for a fact a lot of this points back to slavery. Because see, we don't question anything, and yet I do. I'm so thankful my father taught me to question things. Not just for what you hear and not for what is spoken in front of you, but you just don't take things as is. I've always questioned, and you guys know that. I've always questioned. It's important to question. Because see, if you don't question, you will strike a knife in someone's heart and not even realize that they're in pain, and you'll take it upon yourself to live out their story through your eyes, through your vision, through your perspective, and you'll just push them to the side, or you just throw them in the trash, and yet they're feeling pain. They're under the clouds of pain, and yet they haven't said anything. And that's what this situation is. That young man is in pain. He's just not speaking it because he has never showed his emotions unless it was anger outbursts. He never showed how he felt in relation to anything before any of these deaths, which is how we found out he had mental illness, because he would just walk through the house and it could be just anything going on. There would be no emotion, at least laugh. You know, if something painful happened, at least cry. At least something. Emotions give us something that, you know, the roller coaster up and down. Like, yes, I know he has to have felt that, because to have bipolar disorder is to feel the up and down, to feel the weight of the up and down, the ride. And yet, we as humans, we all feel the weight and the ride of up and down. We have to, because if you never feel any type of thing, any moment of the day, then you're dead in a sense yourself. But I'll make a video on that another time. I just had to speak on this, because to be so selfish, and hang up the phone on me because what I'm saying is completely truth, is a dire situation. Why is no one questioning this man's feeling through all this? Like, yes, we all have to suffer through the pain of the death that has happened, both of the deaths. But he put his lips on his father's lips to save him. Do you know how that feels? I can't tell you how that feels. And yet I know how he feels, and it breaks my heart. I don't want to start crying. I don't want to start crying. I do not want to start crying again, because something is there. I think he's trying to detach from the feelings of it all, because to not understand the world from a bipolar perspective is not to not understand. It's not to know what to say. Sometimes it's not to know anything at all. It's so sad. So everyone they're losing their mind because how young she was, only 18. her mother really didn't raise her. Her mother, in a sense, really didn't want her. She was so busy chasing a man. So she never really found and felt the comfort of her mother. And then with my cousin, you know how young kids can be, boyfriend and girlfriend, and then they become husband and wife, and then they yell and they scream and they fight. That's just normal. And so I think for her, there had to be some depression. The autopsy will find out later what happened. I kept thinking maybe the baby, because she didn't go get care, pre-pregnancy, prenatal care and all that other stuff. She didn't go through all that. She had complications with her last birth, the first one, before this one. I kept thinking maybe the baby was sick, or the baby was deformed, or the baby, something was wrong with the baby, and maybe the baby had died on the inside of her, and that made her sick, and that played a part in her death. I had all these questions because I knew someone in the past that had actually happened. Their baby had died on the inside of them, and they were carrying their baby for a whole 6 months before they found out. But in the end, they ended up dying because it was kind of sepsis, that how you say it? It was kind of like that because the baby dying tainted her blood. It made her sick, so it killed her. It was toxic to her blood because, see, if a baby dies inside of you, the waste and everything else is on the inside of you. It's being carried in your blood. It's like a rotting waste matter that you see outside, like a dead cow or a dead pig or a dead raccoon maybe. Any type of animal you see, it has to rot. So if a baby dies on the inside of you, all that waste matter is in your blood. People, they don't think like that because they don't know that, and it's because they don't question things when they happen. But yeah, a tragic death and selfishness. I didn't go to my uncle's funeral because I'm at a point where now I no longer attend funerals. For me, it's too traumatizing because I haven't experienced a lot of deaths real close to me like that, like death after death after. I haven't. So, I mean, I have, but they're more like older aunts and uncles and stuff like that, that was on their way out anyway, 70, 80 years old. So when I see someone and they're in person and they're my immediate family and I see them face to face and I see them often and then they just die, they just drop dead like that, for me to stand over their casket, it's too traumatizing. It does something to me. Because they were here and now they're gone. So I no longer attend funerals. And the people that, if it's their husband or their wife or it's my aunt or uncle or whatever, I tell them that. I can't process that. So if I can't process that, how can someone close to that person that has died, how can they process that with mental issues? I talked for over 23 minutes and yet I felt that this needed to be said. We have to consider other people's feelings in death. And I'm repeating again, just like I always repeat. Usually I have a habit of repeating stuff 3 times. It's a habit, yes, because to repeat is clarity. Clarity, repetition, and relation into clarity is to never forget what I said. Meaningful things should never be forgotten because they serve a better purpose of making you realize and understanding. There's others outside of you and I who don't feel and think like you and I. So when it comes to their reaction, don't expect them to think and feel and react the way that you and I do. Allow them to have their way as they have their way, because they might not even understand what the way is. Because see, after all this death and stuff like that, this traumatizing death, the dropping dead, people still have to go on about their life. And they have to put the pieces back together to come to understand of how I'm going to live through this now that they're gone. You got what I'm saying? Because I am an INTJ personality, I look farther than a situation. I look so much farther than the present situation. I could be thinking about 10 years from now and yet never even say. Because to live through a death knows that you have to get up and you have to dust yourself off, not immediately, but in time. And you know that you have to live through this after. And yet you don't know how your life is going to play out. This young man has a son, once again, he's going to raise. He don't even know how it's going to play out. His grandfather, I'm sure he thought about that. How does this play out? How does this story play out? Some people have people die to them and they stop in life. Everything for them mentally stops. Because they're now afraid to move. And they're now afraid to make an effort to do anything. They're afraid to take action because they're stuck in the death, which has just occurred. And their eyes are flickering and moving about, saying, well, how do I handle this? I have never experienced anything like this, so how do I handle this? At 20 years old, you question, how do I handle this? When my dad died at 25, he dropped dead of a massive heart attack. And they was in question of if it was a suicide, and I'm going to make a video about that later on. Yes, I'm exposing. I was 25, and I did not know and understand of what to do. My whole life stopped. It had to. Because that was the first time I ever experienced such anything of that caliber. I did not know what to do. I did not know how to relate to others. I didn't know any of that. And I more than likely, I'm going to tell my aunt, you know what? I think, I won't say his name, but I think with him, he don't know how to relate. Because the deaths, they were so quick. It's different from a cancer or something like that. See, when you deal with a death that's like a cancer, it slowly comes for you and that family and that person who's dying. It slowly comes. So you're able to ride the wave with that. And you're able to go through and process very emotions as it's happening. You're given that time to process. And yet when a person just drops dead, it's like that in a blink of an eye. Everything stops. It's like a stop sign. It comes and it's just there. All you see right in front of you is a stop sign, just like this. Life is just telling you stop. Because now it's time to think of how your life is going to be. And yet, people around the world, especially those that act as if they've been through everything. You have never been through everything. To have been through everything is to have died. I'm saying those that judge people all day, 24 hours a day. To have been through everything and tell other people how they need to feel in relation to this death, that they need to just get over it and they need to just get up and move on, and it has just happened. See, those type of people, they don't understand real life. They don't understand real life. Because see, until the day you die, you will always go through something. And you will always go through tragedies and traumas. That's all I'm saying. You don't know everything in relation to life. Because if you did, you will be dead. Because the only reason why we're here on this earth is a training ground. It's nothing more than that. For humans, Earth is a training ground. It's for you to learn and grow every single day. In every which way. For every single cause. That's why you're here. So when the lessons and everything is over, when the gift of the lesson is over, that's when you die. It's over. There's nothing more to be learned. And there's nothing more to be had. It's over. Tragedy. I said this before. Some people have died in the most tragic way, and it was meant for them to die in that way, as sad as it sounds. My dad, once again, has dropped dead the way that he did, and he had to go like that. I was accepting of it later on. I got the message. I got the hint. I learned and grew from that. It was his time. The lessons was over. This is the end of the story. Dear life, this is the end of the story. We can't take anything back once a death has played out. But what you could actually give is to be less selfish. Be less selfish in the area of death. Now, if you want to be selfish for everything else, that's fine. Do what you do. But see, death, you can't be selfish in the area of that, because once a person is gone, there's no coming back. There's no coming back. How do you deal with that?